One of the great things about playoff baseball is that any player has the opportunity to play hero. Someone could have spent much of the season in the shadows of others, but out of nowhere, rises to the occasion to play a major part in postseason success. The scenario of a quote-unquote nobody playing hero for a team happened during the 1998 National League Championship Series between the Atlanta Braves and San Diego Padres. For the Braves, this series appearance was like clockwork for them. They won a franchise record 106 games during the regular season and swept the Chicago Cubs in the division series, outscoring them 15-4. Additionally, this championship series appearance was their 7th in a row, dating back to 1991, and naturally, they were the heavy favorites to advance to the World Series. For the Padres, they were more or less the opposite. 1998 was just their 3rd season ever the team made the playoffs, and they had yet to win a World Series, only appearing in the Fall Classic once in club history in 1984. To give a bit more context on the disparity between these two teams, from 1991 to 1998, the Padres had as many winning seasons as the Braves had World Series appearances. Yeah, it's not hard to see why the Padres were the underdog. In spite of the struggles in recent years, San Diego became one of the top teams in the big leagues thanks in part to a much improved pitching roster. The club made several trades and signings to overhaul the bullpen and brought in new pieces to make up the rotation. The most notable of these pitching acquisitions was trading for ace starting pitcher Kevin Brown. Brown would go on to finish 3rd in Cy Young voting that season, and there's no doubt the Padres wouldn't be where they are without him. While the hitting overall was also great, it's clear San Diego relied heavily on the pitching for their success. They had a team ERA of 3.63, which was the 3rd lowest in the National League. Also, 61% of their games were quality starts, the 3rd highest in the National League, and they also led the league in relief pitching wins and saves. Bottom line here, the Padres leaned on their pitchers, and that fact became more apparent during the National League Championship Series. Through the first 3 games of that series, San Diego pitchers allowed a grand total of 3 runs, and the club won all 3 games. Kevin Brown in particular threw a shutout in Game 2, and the team was 1 win away from advancing to the World Series. However, just as the Padres were about to complete the sweep, they fell apart. In Game 4, San Diego starting pitcher Joey Hamilton allowed 4 runs, and in a surprising turn of events, the bullpen followed suit, allowing 4 runs as well, and Atlanta won 8-3. Following that loss, Andy Ashby was penciled in as the starter for Game 5, and he was coming off 7 innings of 1-run ball in Game 1. With a chance to clinch the series here, Ashby was absolutely brilliant. He allowed 2 runs through 6 innings of work, and the Padres led 4-2 heading to the 7th. Unfortunately, that's when things turned for the worst. Ashby was taken out of the game, and Mark Langston took over to start the 7th inning. He faced 1 batter, allowed a single, and was immediately taken out. San Diego manager Bruce Bochy then made a very interesting and controversial decision where he brought in Kevin Brown from the bullpen to pitch. The Padres had multiple relievers ready to use, and yet he brought in a starting pitcher who had just thrown 122 pitches 4 days earlier. In hindsight, bringing in your ace in a situation like this isn't always a bad idea, but given the circumstances, this was absolutely the wrong choice. Of course, I will admit that's easy to say now given what happened, but even had it worked out, I still would have disagreed with the decision. Brown escaped the 7th inning without allowing a run, but in the 8th, he gave up a huge 3-run home run to Michael Tucker that gave the Braves a 5-4 lead. Don Wall came out of the bullpen to replace Brown after the homer, and he would eventually give up a 2-run double to Tony Graffanino to cap a 5-run 8th inning. That double by Graffanino would prove to be clutch, as not only did it give Atlanta a 7-4 lead, it was the deciding run, as they won 7-6. After the game, when asked about his decision to bring in Kevin Brown from the bullpen, Bruce Bochy was quoted saying, "We had our best guy out there with a 2-run lead. We had a chance to win the ball game. We went for it, and it just didn't work." It was also reported that Bochy was unsure if he would use Brown in a potential Game 7, and would have to talk to him and the pitching coach to decide that. Now, we could spend several minutes discussing why Bochy bringing in his ace in that situation is a bad idea, but to name one, it gave the Padres a huge disadvantage with their rotation. You see, the team carried 10 pitchers on their league championship roster, 4 starters, and 6 relievers. 2 of those starters were, of course, Ashby and Brown. Ashby would obviously be unavailable for the rest of the series. Would Kevin Brown start a potential Game 7? I honestly believe it would be so far-fetched if he did. He threw 122 pitches in Game 2, then threw another 41 on 3 days rest in Game 5. Should he start Game 7, it would be on only 2 days rest. Even if he did start that potential Game 7, how long could he even go, or how effective would he even be? For simplicity's sake, Ashby and Brown were likely unavailable. The other 2 starting pitchers were Sterling Hitchcock and Joey Hamilton. They both had similar seasons that year, as Hitchcock had a 3.93 ERA and 99 adjusted ERA across 176 innings during the regular season. Hamilton had a 4.27 ERA and 92 adjusted ERA in 217 innings. They weren't terrible by any means, but they were both average at best. On the other hand, Atlanta had Tom Glavine scheduled to start Game 6 and Denny Nagel for Game 7. In case you didn't know, Tom Glavine won the Cy Young Award that season, while Nagel finished 3rd in Cy Young voting the previous season. So because Bruce Bochy decided to have Kevin Brown pitch out of relief in Game 5, it forced him and the Padres to start, at least on paper, 2 far inferior pitchers than the Braves had. Not to mention, the Padres bullpen was taxed by this point. San Diego used 5 of their 6 relievers within the past 2 games, with a number of them struggling in this series. Before continuing, I bet some of you watching might be thinking that Bochy brought in Kevin Brown because the bullpen had faced recent struggles. Normally, I would agree with that logic, if not for one small, tiny detail that you ought to know. The Padres, and I kid you not, had the best relief pitcher in Major League Baseball available. In 1998, San Diego closer Trevor Hoffman recorded a 1.48 ERA and 265 adjusted ERA across 73 innings. His ERA was the 2nd lowest in the big leagues, his adjusted ERA the 4th best mark, and his 53 saves were the most among any pitcher. He was just as sharp in the postseason, as prior to the start of Game 5, he saved 3 games while allowing only 1 run through 6 1/3 innings of work. Hoffman also did not pitch in Game 4, so had he made an appearance in Game 5, it would have been a normal rest. Why wasn't Trevor Hoffman brought in from the bullpen in the 8th inning in Game 5? I have no idea. Maybe one day I'll get the opportunity to ask Bruce Bochy. As a result of Bochy's dumb decision, if the San Diego Padres want to avoid blowing a 3-0 lead and advance to the World Series for just the 2nd time ever, they needed a strong performance from at least one of their remaining starting pitchers. When Game 6 started, Sterling Hitchcock took the mound, and it's kind of a miracle he's even in this situation in the first place. 1998 was Hitchcock's 7th season in Major League Baseball, and to put it simply, he hasn't been the best pitcher out there. Entering that year, Hitchcock had thrown 619 innings in over 100 starts, where he had an unimpressive 5.07 ERA and 89 adjusted ERA. However, that doesn't tell the full story. In the previous 2 seasons from 1996 to 1997, Hitchcock had a 5.28 ERA and 85 adjusted ERA across 63 starts. There were 37 pitchers to make at least 63 starts during that 2-year span, and Hitchcock has the 2nd worst ERA and 3rd worst adjusted ERA. I don't think anybody would argue he was one of the worst starting pitchers in baseball at the time. The Padres didn't want him in the rotation so badly, he began the season in the bullpen. He likely would have remained there all year, but thanks to an injury to Mark Langston, and later trade of Pete Smith, Hitchcock was forced back into the rotation. Despite the struggles in recent years, he was surprisingly fantastic so far in the postseason. In the National League Division Series against the Houston Astros, Hitchcock had the best game of his career, throwing 6 innings of 1-run ball and striking out 11 batters. In Game 3 of this series, he threw 5 innings and again only allowed 1 run. He was excellent so far, but just to complicate things again, Hitchcock was pitching on short rest. Kevin Brown was set to pitch a potential Game 6 on normal rest, but again, due to Bochy's questionable move, it forced Hitchcock to move up a day. Whatever the circumstances, it was up to him here in Game 6. San Diego's season hung in the balance of one of the worst starting pitchers in baseball in the previous couple of years. All that stood in his and the Padres' way was that year's Cy Young Award winner and a shaky bullpen as support. A bad game here and the Padres are on the doorstep of blowing a 3-0 lead. So, how did Hitchcock do?
Darkness between the mound and home plate.
And Weiss strikes out. 2 out, bases empty. Jones strikes out in a very strong first inning. 3-2 pitch. Got him looking. 2 gone, and that's strikeout number 5 for Sterling Hitchcock. Again, working on 3 days rest in the 6th inning of Game 6. And that's the case. Strikeout number 8 for Sterling Hitchcock.
Sterling Hitchcock, against a 106-win Atlanta Braves team, threw 5 shutout innings in the biggest game of the year. He allowed 2 hits, walked 3, and struck out 8 batters. He also came up clutch with the bat as well. In the top of the 5th, the Padres were leading 2-0, and they had the bases loaded with 2 outs. On an 0-2 pitch, Hitchcock lifted a fly ball out to left field that Danny Bautista couldn't catch, and it landed, allowing 2 runs to score. While those runs were a bonus, they weren't needed, as the bullpen came back to life, where 4 relievers combined to throw 4 shutout innings. San Diego won the game 5-0, clinching their 2nd pennant in franchise history. For his efforts, Sterling Hitchcock was awarded the National League Championship Series MVP award. He allowed 1 run across 10 innings and won both games. It goes without saying that Hitchcock saved the Padres season. With a giant question mark on the bullpen reliability and the unavailability of Andy Ashby and Kevin Brown, San Diego absolutely had to win Game 6. In one of the most crucial games in the team's history up until that point, a pitcher that was legitimately one of the worst in baseball entering that season, who started the year in the bullpen, outdueled the Cy Young Award winner to have the most clutch performance of his life. Hitchcock was perhaps the most unexpected pitcher to rise to the occasion and be the hero the Padres needed. But then again, that's what's amazing about playoff baseball. Anyone at any time can step up and have a clutch performance, no matter what the circumstances are.